you're here with us.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you, Maheen and WomenAscension for inviting me to speak today. Just to give you a little bit background in terms of why I embraced this journey of women equality and my personal experiences. So I was born in Pakistan, like Nosheen. But my family migrated to UK when I was only 5 years old. So my upbringing, my education was all in Britain, in UK. And at that time, and I grew up in the 80s, where a lot of focus around women empowerment and women leadership was happening. So we had at the time, for the first time, Britain had the first female prime minister, Margaret Thatcher, and she was called the Iron Lady. So I grew up in an age where women were told outside the home environment that you could, the world was your oyster, you could go out and get everything. And I grew up at home, although my parents were extremely loving and caring and far too protective. I felt, coming from a Pakistani Muslim background, there were a lot of biases and there was a lot of gender differences between the way I was being raised to the way my brother was being raised. And although I knew it and I felt it subtly, there was no, in many ways, I thought it was biased against him, because as being the middle child, I had an older sister, and then it was me, and then it was my brother. And being the middle child and being a girl, I actually felt my brother had a harder time. My father was more harder on my brother. He had to be something, he had to do something, he had to take on the responsibility of the family. Whereas for me, I got the easy ride. You know, I was always being pampered, always being protective. And that space actually, it was a funny space to be, because there was no real pressure. Although there were restrictions, but they weren't really restrictions. I had the opportunity, if I wanted to break out of that bias, I had the opportunity to do that. So it wasn't like my parents were very strict, but nevertheless, that was my environment that I grew up in. But I never developed any ambitions for being any, you know, although I had ambitions for my career, but nobody allowed me to really harness that. Moving on into my 90s, I got married very at a very early stage and had a typical arranged marriage. But as I sort of progressed and grew from a young girl into a woman, I started realizing and seeing where the biases was and why I didn't really progress with my career. Why were there real limitations there, or was it just me being lazy? Anyway, as I found myself and went through this personal journey of a growing up woman, I realized and started, when I went out and started working, I actually started realizing what my strengths were and actually wanting to be progressive in my career, and realized the only limit that was really put on me was me, myself. I was the one who was putting the limitations on myself. And then I sort of really went for my career while raising my family, started a business, amazing startup, started the business from the back of my kitchen, literally just doing small snacks, then grew it within a year to convert it into a production unit. And after 4 years of being in the business was worth 2.5 million. Having taken that stride, going through a personal growth, by year 8, believe it or not, the business was worth 6.5 million. A year later, I was bankrupt with 2 children, divorced. So that was my journey of being an entrepreneur. And within that journey, the amount of biases and the limitations and the gender disparity that I had faced in my journey was immense. Not only was I fighting with my culture, my religion, my family, of being a female entrepreneur, but I was fighting my own internal battles of lack of confidence. When the business was booming, I was in a boardroom full of men, and I was the only female there. The lack of confidence, not having belief in myself, not being able to voice my opinions was huge limitations because of lack of confidence. So I used to miss not having a female next to me or a role model who could help me give me the confidence and help me make better decisions in my business. Well, one of the reasons why I felt that I had lost my business 10 years later. But after when that journey was over and I really reflected, I took some time out and I really reflected on my journey. What was it after being so successful, so-called successful at that time? What was it that led to my setback? And I realized there were multiple things, which was my own limitations, as I mentioned, which was the environment, my upbringing, the outer environment. So many factors played a part in that journey. But at that point, one of the biggest thing that I think that would have changed the end outcome of that journey was having a female entrepreneur or a woman next to me who was a leader in herself and who could help me and sort of set out her hand, give her hand out to me, and then help me to and pull me forward. I feel it would have made a huge difference to the outcome of my journey at that point. So I started SHEWISE, which is a business coaching organization. We work with business startups and women, and I do a lot of workshops around personal development and business coaching. I am a life coach, also a business coach as well. But one of the things that I wanted to really talk about, having done this journey for almost now coming on to 2 decades, is that women have to be so careful when they come out and represent themselves as gender ambassadors. I have seen from a time where women were just fighting for their basic rights of being represented at a boardroom table, or getting equal pay, or being heard in standing up in conferences and being able to voice their opinions, to an environment which we're facing today in 2022, and especially after the Me Too movement. It almost scares me in the direction that I think our feminism movement is heading. And I feel, and it really scares me, because I think what we're doing is we're almost shooting ourselves in the foot. Because the narrative, the journey that we had set out for ourselves has actually really changed. And even within my environment now, I work with a whole group of men and women, and I've seen a huge shift in the men's attitude in terms of how they communicate with women, how they converse with women since the Me Too movement. And some of them have become, because the whole concept of being politically correct, or being, or saying things in a certain way, I think there's a real mix-up, a confusion between even women, not just the men, but even women themselves, as to what are we fighting for. And what we're really fighting for, I feel, is respect and human rights. It's no longer, feminism is no longer a woman issue anymore. It's a human issue, right? It's human rights that we're fighting for. And with human rights comes respect, not just for women, but for men too. And I feel more and more men, the more we're talking about feminism, the more we're sort of going backwards, because men aren't listening anymore. I've been in conversations and been in rooms where as soon as you start talking about women's rights, men switch off. Oh, there they go again. Oh, there they go again. They've got everything. What more do they want? They've got laws. There's positive discrimination happening in organizations, where organizations are being given certain quotas to fill to make sure that women are on board in their boardrooms. There are we're almost sort of in the Western world, almost not there yet completely, but still we have a better pay rate for women now. Women are being acknowledged and are giving opportunities now. So I think women in the West are progressing, and even women in the East are progressing. But I do want to ask all the women today on this platform and women who are out there to just take a pause and really think about who you are and in terms of a woman, and what it is you're representing as a women ambassador for gender equality. We have to really understand that we are fighting this battle, but it has to be fought with integrity. It has to be fought with respect, for not just for ourselves, but for fellow women. Why are men not listening to these conversations? We should have been 20 decades, almost when did the first women's movement start? In the 60s, right? We're almost 70, 80 years down further line. Although we've progressed a lot, but we still don't have enough men as part of our conversation. And we really have to think about us individually as women, that when we are given the opportunity to have this conversation with a man or with men, how do we have them? How do we, and not through male bashing, not through putting men down, not being, playing the victim. I mean, sometimes some of these conversations take place when we start playing the victim. And I think we need to sort of step out of that role and actually just talk about respect, that we are really is what we're asking for, and talk about the conversations we have them with integrity. And it really, I mean, one of the personal incidents that happened to me was that I was part of a project where majority of my fellow colleagues were male, and the person who was leading the project was a male. And I was having a very heavy schedule, so I kept missing the team meetings. And I think I must have missed around 2 team meetings, or 2 or 3, which had the core activities and responsibilities were discussed that I needed to take on. And I kept, because I missed these meetings, I kept reaching out to this individual person, and I said, and contacting him on WhatsApp personally through private message and saying, can we please have a conversation and just catch up on, the sessions that I've missed out. And this person would not respond to me privately in a private conversation. And I just thought, why is this person not responding? And every question that I asked him personally in a private message, he would make sure that he responds to it, but he would always do it in the group meeting. And it was only later that I was come to know that this individual was now had some kind of an experience, and I don't know what that experience was, but it